Amanti del mondo aerobico ed anaerobico, bentornati, or even better, lovers of aerobic and anaerobic training. Here we are, back to another episode of Endurance Roundtable. Today is the 28th episode of Endurance Roundtable with Sam Scott, founder or CEO of Enhanced, one great company that have been developed for helping athletes with diabetes. And we're gonna talk about diabetes today. I also work with Team Novo Nordisk. That is a team with athletes that have diabetes type 1. And here we are. Welcome. Hi, Sam. How are
Hey,
you doing?
yeah, good. Just setting up. Yeah, good to be here. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
you're welcome, man. And thank you so much for this live and for your availability. It has been a great honor for me to receive your email and to have a great guest like you today in the live. So I'm very happy for this and for sharing this knowledge about diabetes with you, because it's something incredible. Like, I was presenting you your background about Team Novo Nordisk, and maybe you can introduce yourself. And thank you for joining us in the round table.
Yeah, so thanks. So, my name's Sam Scott. I'm an exercise physiologist. I have a PhD from Liverpool John Moores University. The main focus of that was around helping people living with type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes to overcome some of the common barriers related to exercise. After that, I've spent a number of years in Canada, Switzerland, working in clinical research focused around blood glucose management and type 1 diabetes in particular. And spent quite a number of years working with professional athletes living with type 1 diabetes, a lot of focus around professional cycling, but also other sports in this area. And then more recently, left these positions to focus on our new startup, which is called Enhanced. This is a technology solution which is designed to help people living with type 1 diabetes around exercise, different factors, but I'm still really involved with academia, still actively involved with clinical studies related to blood glucose management, etc. So that's really what my passion is.
Good. Very happy to share this. And also, maybe we can talk about your book that you wrote, Empowered, that is about the management of diabetes in athletes. So maybe this also can be useful for our coaches that are hearing us today, and also for people that are interested in this field.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is the book. The motivation for this was it's co-written with Simon Helleputter. So Simon is an exercise physiologist from Belgium, really
Mm-hmm.
smart guy. He's done a PhD with his major focus was around type 1 diabetes, but really interested in cycling, exercise, physiology, etc. And we recognized that there wasn't a single resource that was accessible for people to understand some of these concepts. And we wanted to create a book which was accessible for people living with type 1 diabetes who are interested in sports, also sports coaches. And it focuses on all kinds of topics which are not really discussed elsewhere. So things like implementing different nutritional strategies around exercise and type 1 diabetes, around recovery practices, around different things related to fueling and what the implications are if you're
Yeah.
living with type 1 diabetes. So it was something that we really thought was missing, wanted to make it accessible in terms of the language, in terms of like the availability, etc. So yeah, so it's something that we're quite pleased with, and thanks
Okay.
for highlighting that.
Yeah. As a coach, it's in my wish list, so for sure I'm going to buy it in the next few months. At the moment, I have some books that I'm reading, so yeah, maybe to wait a bit is far better now then I can focus on it. And yeah, for sure, it could be useful for people that are working with athletes with type 1 diabetes, or maybe other conditions that are connected with this condition that is related to glycemia. So yeah, for sure. And yeah, first thing first, what is diabetes? Like, can we discuss about it afterwards? And now we can also present it. Diabetes is a condition that can affect people's life, but can also present a new way to improve life if we can manage well the daily management of people. So like life stresses. Also, sports can be useful for people that have diabetes. But what is diabetes?
Yeah, so diabetes is often something that is not so understood by the general population. It's broadly speaking an umbrella term to describe a number of different conditions.
Yeah.
And the most common types of diabetes are type 1 diabetes, you have type 2 diabetes, and then you have additional types such as gestational diabetes, which affects women during pregnancy. And then you have other kind of subcategories such as pre-diabetes. And overall, looking at statistics of number of people affected and each type of diabetes. So there's, according to the latest statistics, worldwide is around 580 million people living with all types of diabetes worldwide. 580 million people.
Yeah.
And then a further 500 million people living with pre-diabetes. Within that 587 million, that's the statistic that's there at the moment. The majority of people are living with type 2 diabetes, approximately 90% of those individuals, and around 9 million worldwide are living with type 1 diabetes. Okay, so
Yeah.
and what does that mean, and what does that mean for the individuals living with the conditions? So type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is where my main focus has been, sort of professionally. And I don't live with type 1 diabetes
Yeah.
myself. My motivation is through the fact that I have been working with a lot of people living with the condition extremely closely, seeing how much of a challenge this is, especially in relation to exercise, and that really motivated me to work in this area. So type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
And this is caused by some unknown factor at the moment. So we think it's something that's related to environment, or there's some aspects that are related to genetic aspects. So it's hereditary, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
There are different hypotheses and there are different factors that have been shown to increase or decrease the risk of this. And what happens with type 1 diabetes is that for some reason, your body's immune system starts attacking the cells within the pancreas. So this is an organ within the body
Yeah.
which produces different hormones. It attacks the beta cells in the pancreas, and it means that the pancreas is no longer able to produce a hormone called insulin. And
Yeah.
insulin is the hormone that's responsible for causing your different tissues within the body, such as the skeletal muscle, such as adipose tissue, so fat tissue, to take up glucose into the body.
Yeah.
So you no longer produce this key hormone yourself. This causes your glucose to rise very high unless you replace this hormone exogenously. So for the rest of your life, you need to monitor glucose levels, and then you need to administer insulin
Yeah.
through a pen or a pump. So that's type 1 diabetes. It's a lot
Yeah.
of information, so I can kind of
Yeah.
stop there if you have any questions related to that.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone can ask everything that you need in the comments below here, and you can also use the box that we have for comments and questions. So every doubt we will reply as soon as possible. And yeah, you talked about pumps and also the pens that we can use for helping us maintaining the glycemia in control during exercise or also during daily activity. But what are these types of, and what is the best type of pen or pump that we can use? Because we know that there is something that is connected directly to pancreas and to continuous glucose monitor during exercise, that this can be useful for maintaining a great quantity of glucose during exercise. But do you know, or do you think that there is a better option, or it's depending on the type of person?
Yeah, so this is a really difficult question to answer. It's pretty
Okay.
much impossible. So
Okay.
there's no best way of
Okay.
managing type 1 diabetes. It's super specific to
Yeah.
the individual. It also depends on what you have access to in terms
Okay.
of health insurance coverage, where
Yeah.
you're living in the world. So depending on where you're located, you will get different access to different
Yeah.
technologies, etc. And you will also get a different level of coverage. And it will depend on what your preferences are. And then if you're particularly interested in exercise, it will depend on what works best for you given the
Yeah.
type of sport that you do. So just kind of stepping back, I mean, I don't know if you want to go a bit deeper or whatever, but just sort of just on a high level,
Yeah.
type 1 diabetes is this condition where you've got to, as I say, monitor your glucose, administer the insulin, and there are certain ways in which you might do this and certain ways in which you might rely on different technologies.
Yeah.
So in terms of monitoring your glucose, traditionally this was done through taking blood samples from the finger, so
Yeah.
multiple times per day, pricking the finger, then having to take a reading and make decisions off of that. Nowadays, a lot of people are fortunate enough to have access to continuous glucose
Yeah.
monitors. So these devices, which have really become a lot more available in the last sort of
That's,
5 to 8 years,
yeah.
I would say, something like that. They've become more accessible in terms of health insurance coverage. So what these
Fortunately.
yeah, and these are devices that are helping a lot of people. So they are small medical devices. They attach to the skin. Many people
Yeah.
may have seen these. You
Yeah.
have the sensor. There's a small filament that sticks just under the skin, and
Yeah.
then that is taking a measure. It's taking a measure which is then calibrated to read glucose
Okay.
concentration. It's transmitting that signal to either the mobile phone or to
Okay.
a transmitter, and then the individual is able to make decisions in real time
Yeah.
what their glucose is and sort of see how to act accordingly. And then in terms of insulin management, you've got options of using injections. So
Yeah.
basically, you would want to. I'm massively oversimplifying
Yeah. Yeah. For
everything
sure.
here just due to the time that we have on this conversation, but you're basically trying to mimic as close as you can to what your body's normal physiology would
Yeah.
be. And this includes anticipating meals that contain carbohydrates in particular, having the insulin that's able to cover this to
Yeah.
bring your glucose down.
In terms of quantity and quality also, because the quantity of insulin that you can inject is related also to glycemic index and the quantity of carbohydrate that maybe you are eating. I mean, is it are these factors related?
Yeah. So, I mean, for somebody living with type 1 diabetes, it's extremely complex condition
Yeah.
to manage. So I've already thrown out like so many different concepts here. So
Yeah.
this is to give sort of gravity to what an individual is sort of faced with upon diagnosis. So imagine being diagnosed, all of these different concepts, and I've not even come close towards
Yeah,
describing everything. You've got all of these different factors related to managing nutrition. Uh, it's been estimated that somebody living with type 1 diabetes has over 200 decisions every single day on
yeah,
top of everything else to manage.
yeah,
And it's exactly things such as you say. So, carbohydrate intake, and this will be around factors such as quantity, but also type. And type will be in terms of the sort of glycemic index, as you
yeah,
say, but also in relation to what the carbohydrate is consumed with. So,
yeah,
consuming carbohydrate in combination with other macronutrients such as protein, fiber, this will alter the amount or timing of insulin that's required,
yeah,
and it will also depend on other factors such as your individual insulin
yeah,
sensitivity, whether you've had exercise, whether you've recently administered insulin. So it's an
yeah,
extremely complex and arduous condition to live with.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Maybe we can eat it with protein and fiber, so we can lower the absorption, and maybe this could be a easier way to uh, manage the problem. But yeah, for sure, we can talk about problem if we have a solution, and the solution is to really manage well the use of the short action insulin and the long action insulin. Because, for example, I'm coaching an athlete that has diabetes type 1, and
Okay.
I know that he is managing well with these two types of lancets. And yeah, for sure, this is not a problem if his man is used to do this every day, and is like part of his habits. And for sure, it's not. It cannot be considered a problem, and actually is like a point of not weakness, but also it's a point of like a revolution for him when he discovered to manage well the diabetes, and now maybe with a nutritionist he can also be even better as a cyclist. That's the solution. And yeah, and like talking about intensities, because we talked about quality and quantity of um, carbohydrate, but we can also talk about quality and quantity of training sessions, because we're talking about exercising today and exercising in diabetes. So, is there a difference between high intensity or moderate intensity, and like the duration of the exercise? Like, we know that there is a research that you did in a 7-day stage tour, grand tour with Novo Nordisk, and athletes that have type 1 diabetes, and we saw that the glycemia was lower during night, but during the day and during the stage, there was no biggest difference between the conditions. So, can you tell anything about this to us, and maybe some insights about the training session that can be done for athletes that have type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so my passion, my interest is around helping people living with type 1 diabetes to
Yeah,
exercise, regardless of what their goal is. So I'm interested in helping those who have competed at the professional level, but also helping people who are new to exercise.
yeah,
And I mean, just to give a little bit of context
yeah,
as to how challenging this is and how big of a sort of a difficulty this is to fit into people's lives. So, exercise has an enormous impact on blood glucose management for people living with type 1 diabetes. Very kind of simply speaking, the reasons for this is that we mentioned that your goal when living with type 1 diabetes is blood glucose management. You're kind
Yeah.
of taking over the role of your pancreas.
Yeah.
You're required to do the job of what was previously being taken completely automatically, completely taken for granted by the individual. Then all of a sudden you're having to make the decisions and you're having to take account for this. The thing is that with blood glucose management, what happens in that is that you have two main pathways within the skeletal muscles for bringing glucose into the muscles
Yeah.
to lower blood glucose concentration. So insulin, the hormone, is responsible for this.
Yeah.
Under normal sort of physiology in people without diabetes, upon consuming carbohydrates, your body will sense this, will release insulin, and this will act on the muscles. There will be different pathways which are activated that will cause glucose transporters to move to the membrane of the skeletal muscle to bring in glucose.
Yeah.
Glucose levels will lower down.
Sure. Yeah.
The other important pathways involve muscle contractions, and this is what's really important, but also creates big challenges for those living
Yeah.
with type 1 diabetes. So, muscle contractions stimulate other pathways within the skeletal muscle, which act to bring glucose into the muscle.
Yeah.
These pathways are separate and sort of additive to the insulin stimulated pathways, which means that if you have insulin in the circulation plus contractions, your blood glucose concentration can lower very sharply.
Yeah.
So, on a simplistic level, what happens with exercise is muscle contractions equals an increase in the rate at which glucose is taken up into the muscles.
Yeah.
But exercise isn't as simple as to just say that exercise equals lower blood glucose concentration. There's lots and lots of factors which come into play related to exercise,
Yeah.
which means that you need to be on top of that as somebody living with type 1 diabetes. So generally what is reported is that lower intensity exercise will cause a reduction in blood glucose concentration,
Yeah.
whereas high intensity exercise will cause an increase. So things like high intensity resistance training, so heavy weightlifting, sprinting, etc. This is really oversimplified. The main reason for that is that with these high intensity exercise sessions, you have other hormones which are released, which will impact rate of glucose delivery from the liver. So
Yeah.
you'll have hormones such as adrenaline, noradrenaline, which will activate the liver to cause a release of glucose from the liver.
Yeah.
So that's it as a very oversimplified
Yeah.
way of looking at things, but you've got all sorts of different things that you've got to take into account.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And we can also take into account that maybe if the baseline level of blood glucose is higher, then usually blood glucose starts to like have an exponential downgrade after the beginning of the exercise. And also there are other factors that are the external factors, such as like temperature. We were talking about before in the video call, that is maybe temperature, external temperature, but also maybe the management of core temperature. So maybe you are doing a research about this, and we can talk about this afterwards. And also, like, yeah, you talked about adrenaline, so the stress that there is maybe before a race, and this can also take into account other factors such as the management of pre-race gels and other factors that could help people in manage the hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia and to maintain euglycemia. So yeah, for sure, this could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want to get across is that there isn't a one size fits all
Yeah.
way in which you would expect your blood glucose to respond, even
Yeah.
looking at very similar scenarios.
Yeah.
So different people respond differently to different circumstances, and it will also depend based on specific events that are occurring during a given exercise. There are
Yeah.
general trends that we tend to see, but the main thing that people living with type 1 diabetes need to be aware of is trying to spot patterns themselves, trying to work with an endocrinologist or work with the technologies they have access to figure
Mhm.
out how their blood glucose tends to respond.
Yeah.
And then if it's something that's interesting to you, try and learn a bit more about why certain things are happening from a physiological perspective, because there are
Yeah.
always reasons behind it, but it's difficult to tease these out, and it's also difficult to give an exact sort of prescription of
Yeah.
when you exercise under these circumstances, this is what you will
Yeah.
expect. But
There's no input and
yeah,
output that's perfectly corrected and linear. It's not life. Like it's
yeah.
all not linear. Like life as we are uh, complex. So yeah, for sure we cannot talk about this. You can, if you have this, you can do this. Yeah, for sure you could do this, but you have to take into account other factors that maybe are different in this perfect period of your life. So yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the way. And for sure, helping an help of an endocrinologist or also a nutritionist or a dietitian, yeah, for sure could be useful.
Mhm.
And in your opinion, what can we do as coaches to help athletes during their training session? Like when we work with a type one athlete with with diabetes, what can we do with him? Like how can we prescribe a training session that we know that is at least almost perfect fit for him, depending on the life that he's conducting. Like, for example, if we know that he for sure cannot train fasted during the morning and maybe you only have time at 9 p.m. before going to bed, and we know that maybe going like having a training session after in the day, like after 5 p.m. could be not so optimal for him or for level of glucose. What can we do in these situations? Like, how can we manage the stress that we can put to his body, and then to the stress that it will be there will be after the training session. This is the most important for his life actually, because we know that he has a also social life. Maybe he can go out with friends or with his girlfriend or boyfriend. So yeah, what can you tell about this? How can we manage this?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is communication.
Communicate.
So
Yeah,
understanding them and really acting as the person of support, and understanding that them as the individual living with type 1 diabetes is the person who's ultimately going to be the most knowledgeable person around their
yeah,
blood glucose management. Also understanding what additional support that they have and access they have in terms of
yeah,
access to an endocrinologist, and
yeah,
what their experience is, and how they can get the best out of working with them to incorporate factors related to training and
yeah,
whatever their sporting goals are. And then yeah, it's about communication. With people living with type 1 diabetes, it's absolutely possible to compete really at the top level.
yeah,
This is for sure, but it doesn't mean that it's something that's going to be easy. It's got to take the individual goals, the level of self motivation, and also making sure that you can support in the best way possible with the tools at your disposal. So I think it's even more important is just making sure that you establish trust, communication, be willing to learn and listen from them, and The other thing that you said about fitting in factors around their lifestyle, etc.
Yeah,
This as well, it sort of works the opposite way. It's similar within competitions. So competitions will run according to whatever the schedule is.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't get to decide that. You don't get to put a delay on that. So
yeah. Need
it's
to be there.
around coming up with strategies that you get the best out of the training, strategies in the lead up to competition to make sure that you're as best prepared as possible. So I think my take home and my answers are not going
Yeah,
to be as straightforward as just this is what you should do. I think the most important thing is communication, understanding that everybody's diabetes is different,
yeah,
understanding that it's a good idea to look for support from endocrinologists and the technology and try
yeah,
and familiarize yourself with what that means. Um, but in terms of the actual training itself, in terms of what to offer on that side, um, I think that you're pretty much going to want to have very similar training principles
yeah,
that you would use with an athlete who does not live with type
yeah,
1 diabetes. So you'll still want to be prescribing exercise intensity in the same way. You'll be wanting to use power, like if you're working with cyclists, you'll be
yeah,
wanting to use power output, you'll be wanting to use heart rate, etc.
yeah,
That's the way that the training is prescribed, but then
yeah,
you manage the glucose in relation to the needs of the athletes, speaking with them constantly and being aware of different factors of how there's going to be additional periodization challenges, different
yeah,
nutritional challenges, different challenges around logistics,
yeah,
etc. That's going to be also a big thing that you have to take on board as a coach.
yeah, yeah. And for sure, talking about this thing of periodization, we can also talk about, yeah, training periodization, but also nutrition periodization, because we know that maybe athletes that have diabetes could be affected by like low energy availability or REDS or other condition also, and maybe they are more. There is more possibility to have this than in athletes that don't have diabetes. So, is there a solution?
I think I just lost you.
Ketogenic maybe diets or like low carbohydrate diets, but maybe not have not enough energy, because we know that carbohydrates are useful and are vital for us as endurance athletes. But for sure, we know that we need to have a limit on this if we have diabetes. But what's the limit, and how can we use different periodization on nutrition to help athletes in this case?
Mhm. This is like a
Yeah,
huge
man, I know.
topic. The majority of these things we don't have answers
Okay.
to exactly, just because there's so little research in this area that's been
Yeah.
conducted. Also, any research that has been done has been largely observational.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, when we look at type 1 diabetes, become outdated quite quickly because of the rapid changing access to technology. So
Yeah.
studies that were done maybe 10, 15 years ago are completely different to the reality of people, how people tend to manage type 1 diabetes today, just due to
Yeah.
things such as access to technology, changes in the way that insulins work, etc. But we can make sort of educated guesses in a way, in being sensible as to what we might take from the research that's being conducted in athletes who do not live with type 1 diabetes, of
Yeah.
which there is a lot, and then also trying to do thought experiments around how might that principle fit into
Okay.
the training regimen of somebody living with type 1 diabetes. So
Okay.
there's and this is where a lot of my interest is in, and a lot of the stuff that we've sort of written has been sort of trying to translate some of these factors into how we might incorporate this into type 1 diabetes and what that would potentially mean.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really interesting when we start looking at these things, because so many of these factors related to training periodization, nutritional strategies, fueling,
Yeah.
rely on insulin as the
Yeah.
hormone. Like if you have insulin that is knocked out and then you're all of a sudden reliant on self-management of insulin therapy,
Yeah.
that whole system that you take for granted as an athlete without type 1 diabetes is
Mhm.
having to be managed in a completely different way, and physiology risks are going to be completely different. And we can pick out some examples just to sort of look at and explore. So, I mean, one of the things that I was interested in, because a lot of researchers that I was working close by while I was in Liverpool were focused on restricted carbohydrate training regimens, and there's different types of these. And what they were doing was doing various studies in athletes who do not have type 1 diabetes, where they were looking at taking muscle biopsies from people who were doing some of these different strategies. They were also implementing these in a wide variety of sports teams.
Yeah.
So these guys were working with professional cyclists,
Okay.
really at the top level, seeing that some of these strategies had benefits for a variety
Okay.
of reasons. And they would regularly incorporate these according to different goals over the course of a season. So if we focus on cycling, carbohydrate restricted strategies, we've got a few different things we might look at. So like
Yeah.
fasted training,
Yeah.
twice per day training. So
Yeah. Right.
cycling twice per day. This has been shown in some studies to have beneficial effects
Yeah.
compared to cycling once per day.
Yeah.
And there's a range of different studies that have been done in this area where they've even done things where they've cycled one leg twice per day and compared
Okay.
this to the other leg of the same individual doing once
Yeah.
per day training. And then basically the theory, the mechanism behind this is related to the second training session being done in a glycogen depleted state.
Yeah.
And then there's different protocols, such as sleep low, train low, which is
Yeah.
basically where you would train in the evening, not to replenish carbs, and then
Yeah.
train in the morning in a glycogen depleted state.
Yeah.
And these studies which were going on, and these practices which were very common in athletes without diabetes, got me thinking about the idea of, well, how practical is that to put into practice if you live with
Yeah.
type 1 diabetes? What would that mean in terms of risk of hypoglycemia, blood
Yeah.
glucose management, um, looking at those different things? And then also, why might we want to think about incorporating them for different reasons? So, sleep low, train low, for example, in somebody who's using um, uh, multiple daily injections, this is going to be really challenging overnight,
Yeah.
because you will be at a very high risk
Yeah.
or an increased risk of hypoglycemia overnight, because you're not.
And you notice
Um,
this during the night? Like, how can you notice this during night? Like, if you have,
the way that you would notice it is if you're using a CGM,
yeah.
that you would see this on the trace. I mean, ideally, you don't experience this at all, but you would see that you had gone low, or there might be a catecholamine response overnight that would cause you to wake up, or somebody might notice that you're experiencing a hypo overnight. It's a really dangerous situation
Okay.
for
So the
people.
rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, related to this, again, it's not based on research per se. It's mostly about speaking to athletes, seeing what could potentially work, looking at the practical challenges, and realizing that if you live with type 1 diabetes, you are at so many disadvantages because these practices that are just taken for granted from athletes without diabetes
Yeah,
are just so much more challenging. Um, yeah, and there's other carbohydrate restricted things that we might look at, like fasted training, for example. This might have different benefits. This is something that athletes commonly
yeah,
implement for weight management, especially in the off season, etc., and how somebody living with type 1 diabetes
hmm,
might actually benefit from doing these sessions
yeah,
because paradoxically, you might assume that being fasted during exercise would increase your risk of hypos. Uh, it may actually be quite a safe form of
yeah,
exercise to do because you haven't got insulin on board.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. So stop me if I'm kind of overcomplicating
No, no, no,
things.
you're not
But
creating
I
it safe.
mean,
And
the main take home again, just to sort of stress, is that type 1 diabetes is super complicated in terms of what
yeah,
the individual has to live with. There's
yeah,
all of these different factors, and yeah, it's about trying to find the best way or the best solution to fit these into your training, but also make sure that the athlete, first and foremost, is always safe, always managing their glucose in a way because you're wanting to avoid hypoglycemia, but also able to find strategies to be able to compete at a level that they want and deserve
yeah,
to
for sure,
achieve.
for sure. And knowing the four types of diabetes that we talked about during the at the beginning of this live, that is type 1, type 2, gestational, and the pre-diabetes, is there a way to like really solve this or not? Like for example, if we have then type 2 diabetes, can we reserve the situation, right? Reverse the situation and become in a normal condition, become in a normal condition after, for example, type 2 diabetes, only by doing good exercises and maybe have a good diet after having a period of where we didn't have physical activity and we didn't have possibility to move, and maybe we had this problem for this reason. Can we reverse it or not?
So this is a really complicated question, and it's something
Yeah,
that probably you could discuss for over an
for
hour. So,
yeah.
like, I mean, just sort of as
We need for
quickly as
sure to meet up
possible.
here in Verona
Yeah.
for having a chat together here. Next
Mhm.
time you had a meeting with your group in of Inest, we can meet here in Desenzano in my studio, or otherwise in Verona to have a chat there. Easy walk.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. I mean, to try and answer as quickly as I can and sort of as sort of comprehensively as I can at the same
Yeah,
time, I guess. Um, Considering always the different types of diabetes, but the thing that you've highlighted there is uh, so, yeah, you've really got to consider the different types there.
yeah,
Type 1 diabetes most definitely is not reversible through
yeah,
lifestyle changes. It's an autoimmune condition. This is something that is not reversible. It's resulting on this. The other thing that you highlighted, looking at the different types such as type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, etc., this is a complex conversation because you've got the individual to look at in terms of the individual's challenges, their lifestyle, what their environment is like, and then you've got
yeah,
the overall macro global scale. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, there's like 1 billion people who are affected by either diabetes, like all the types of diabetes,
yeah,
plus pre-diabetes together. So it's something that's obviously extremely complicated, obviously affecting a lot of different people, and seems to be very much influenced by lifestyle in terms of our exposure to all of the different factors, such as increasingly sedentary jobs, the changes in nutrition, diet, which is quite sort of problematic, especially in certain Western countries. Lack of physical activity. There's
Yeah.
also genetic factors to take into account. So it's not easy to answer on a macro scale, but also on an individual scale. There is evidence that some interventions can help prevent, even reverse type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
The main take home is sort of that the quicker that you intervene,
Yeah.
the better, in that pre-diabetes is the best time to
Yeah.
start implementing changes, whether it's there's nutritional strategies such as low calorie diets, low carbohydrate diets, which may help. It will depend on the individual, the stage at which they're at. It will depend on
Yeah.
the level of beta cell function that they have, the level of insulin sensitivity, and
Yeah.
then other things such as environment, genetics. So trying to answer that very kind of complex question as quickly
Yeah.
as possible.
It's
I
different.
think that's the best I can do in like
Yeah.
1 or 2 minutes.
For sure. But we know, yeah, that for sure, if we know that people with type 2 diabetes have a lower insulin sensitivity, we know that the management of this type of person, that people that have type 2 in comparison with people with type 1, is different, and we know that we need to individualize the approach. And we know that with people that have type 2 diabetes, that is something that we can reverse, and it's something that can improve with times and over time, thanks to physical activity and other factor. We may have even more attention in the everyday phases, because we know that every single step that a person can do in the daily life, in terms of maybe eating outside with the friends and going for a pizza with friends and something like that, could have a big impact in the short term. And if the intervention is done in the short term, we need to pay attention to every detail. And the thing is that in people that have type 1, maybe they are the ones that have habits about type 1 diabetes, so they don't have problems about this, and for them it's like daily life to have the lancets and to have this type of things. And for them, maybe the management is normal. For the other one, is something useful, and they know that it's important and vital for them. And for the ones that have type 2, is something that they need to pay more attention in the everyday life to solve the problem, if they want to solve it, because you cannot help a person that don't want to be helped. So for sure.
Well, I think that it's not so simple, and I think it's really important not to bucket people into different
No, yeah, for sure.
categories, etc. So, like with type 2 diabetes, there is an assumption that somehow, if the individual is more motivated or something, that this would be. It's so critical to understand the individual's environment,
Yeah.
their own medical history, where they are currently. It's not always down to things which might be perceived as
Yeah.
that it's completely reversible with just a bit of work.
Okay.
It's really a complex condition which has all sorts of environmental, genetic
Yeah.
factors and sociological factors. Some people really don't have access to good quality nutrition,
Yeah.
or the time that they need to do the exercise. It depends on work, family,
Or yeah.
your socioeconomic status. So
Yeah.
this is a problem that seems to be much more complex than
For
just
sure.
boiling it down to this or this. I think
Yeah.
that that's as well why the conversation could just expand to be even a couple of hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very complicated, and also the complexities of trying to sort of bracket diabetes in one single conversation is also particularly complicated, just down to the fact that you have these different types, the different ways in which they're managed, etc., the different
Yeah.
definitions, the different individuals, and those factors that they will place. So my goal with these kind of conversations, of why I want to sort of be here and do this, is sort of not so much to provide any sort of step by step, because I don't
Yeah.
think that this exists,
Yeah.
but more sort of to highlight that it is very complicated, that there are people who are trying to work to help, and we're really trying to focus on individualization and
Yeah.
trying to focus on these things. But yeah, it's really not an easy
Yeah, it's all
topic.
based on psychosocial factors. So, and the model, the biopsychosocial model is for sure important, because we know that there are different aspects that comes into account when you need to talk about diabetes. So for sure we cannot take one factor and the other one outside. No, for sure we can connect it. And one point plus another point is not the one, like one
Mhm.
plus one, it's not two, but it's the interaction between all the points that create these conditions. So for sure we can talk about this for hours. And yeah, talking about like last question or last topic, like talking about Ernst and so the company that you're the CEO. So good way, good one. And yeah, for sure, how can this technology can help athletes, like non-diabetic, athletes with non-diabetes, or athletes with that have diabetes? So, what's your point on this? And do you think that there is a way to help people that don't have diabetes also, and could be this really useful or not for people that don't have diabetes?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my passion is really to try and help people living with type 1 diabetes
Yeah,
to exercise. And I've worked across different spaces, in clinics doing research, worked with technology, and worked in professional sports. And the motivation for founding Enhanced was because I really wanted to put a solution into people's hands faster,
yeah,
and recognizing that we are seeing an increase in access to technologies that can gather data,
yeah,
but there isn't a tool which is able to simplify and assist the way in which people
yeah,
are able to make sense of this information. Type 1 diabetes is really kind of data driven in terms of you're having glucose all of the time. How can we help individualize some of these questions, such as what happens to my glucose when I do a certain intensity of exercise? How do I reduce some of the pressure related to all of these decisions? So in this conversation, I think
yeah,
that we've talked about just how complex it is and how overwhelming some of these
yeah,
factors can be. How can we leverage the data that is becoming available, simplify it, and now use AI to start helping people to be better able to take action from what happens during specific events that they do? What happens
yeah,
when they do certain nutritional interventions to help around their training? How
yeah,
do we guide people like that? Because this is something that's just not there. And the way that I was perceiving it was that it's taking too long to get information out of the lab into the hands of people that
yeah.
really need it. So yeah, that's really what we want to help and achieve.
Okay, good. Thank you. And thank you so much. If anyone has a question, for sure you can put the question down here in the comments of the live. Otherwise, you can send us a DM, direct message in Instagram or via email, emanuelemagistrelli@gmail.com. And for you, Sam Scott, if you want also to say your email.
Yeah, so it's sam at enhanced.com. So it's enhanced spelled enhance hyphen d.com. Or you can find me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much, Sam. It was so interesting to do this live with you. And for sure, thank you for sharing your knowledge about diabetes. It was so interesting. And for sure, I will ask you other questions after it. And in the next month, for sure, we can try to do a meet here in Verona or Desenzano. So I can also let you see the Endurance Explorers Lab in the
Okay,
garden. You will be
nice.
welcome here, for sure. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone that joined the live today. I hope that you enjoyed it, and for every question, you can for sure send us a message. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks. Ciao.
See you. Ciao, ciao.